Hello and a very warm welcome back to the garden. Now, slugs are an issue for many gardeners, and in this video I want to show you how I approach slugs. I use a three-step process, and I feel that there's too much focus on just the attacking side. There's two other really critical elements to when it comes to dealing with slugs. So hopefully you'll find a few methods and strategies in this video which is really going to help you win the war against them. I believe that controlling slugs is easier than we think, but it's really important that we stay disciplined, because discipline is the ultimate secret to dealing with slugs. Now, I mentioned a three-part process, so this is a whole strategy and a complete guide on how to deal with slugs. And the first part of the three sections is prevention. So this is where you make your garden the least enticing possible for slugs. The second part is to attack, and this is just to make sure that they don't get your prize seedlings, for example. And then the third is to maintain, and this is where you have a balance of prevention and attacking. So over the long term, you never suffer really big damage. Let's look at the first stage, which is prevention. So we're not trying to make the garden nice and enticing for slugs to come along. And the first thing that you should look at is keeping grass short. So for example, the grass in front of me is a good length. Slugs aren't really going to hide in that during the day. But when you have longer grass, for example like this is where you'll find slugs hiding. And it's especially important that you keep grass down short around the perimeter of your garden. So I just like to make sure that I'm just keeping this maintained, and I'll just go around the soft fruit and then I'll come along and trim this, keep it nice and short, and it just means that there's less places for slugs to hide. And if there's less places for slugs to hide and feel safe, they'll try and go somewhere else for some food. So for example, here behind me you can see that I've got to just do a bit of clearing because some slugs could be hiding there and trying to venture in. The next thing you want to do to prevent slugs, or to prevent them from hiding as much, is to just be very vigilant for anything that's on the ground that doesn't actually need to be there. And I'll come on to why you might want to leave planks on the ground later on in the video. But after every gardening session, just before you head back to your house, have a quick look around your garden and tidy and pick up anything that's on the ground that shouldn't be there, because this is just perfect habitat for slugs to hide underneath during the day. One of the prime locations that slugs like to hide under are containers and pots like this. Now, the great thing about what we're growing here, which are different soft fruits such as blueberries, is that slugs aren't interested in them. But because it's so easy for slugs to hide underneath, try and place your containers away from where you're growing your salads and brassicas, because this is what slugs truly love. And another thing that you need to do is, if you need to do a bit of watering, try and water only in the early morning, because watering in the evening creates moisture, and that only encourages your slugs to come out and it makes it more appealing for them. So just be sure when you're watering your seedlings especially to only water them in the morning. If you have an area of your garden, or perhaps a raised bed that you've slightly abandoned with the weeding, then now is a good time to make sure that you go and collect as many weeds as possible, because the covering of the ground with weeds is only going to keep it more moist and encourage slugs to come along. Now here we've got rhubarb, and rhubarb is known to be loved by slugs, and you can just see here some of that evidence. But the fact that I've got rhubarb out to one side of the garden rather than in the centre of the garden means that the slug population is hopefully concentrated around here, and rhubarb grows so quick it can take a hit, but unlike my lettuce seedlings, they can't. One of the easiest ways to lessen potential disaster with your salads and also your brassicas is by trying to grow them as big as possible in modules and in containers, so they're protected from slugs. And then when you transplant them, for example they're almost ready to transplant. These are a little bit early, but they have a few true leaves. So even if slugs come and eat a few of the leaves, they're not going to destroy the whole plant like they would if it was a small seedling. And what this means is if you see slug damage, you have time to act and the plant isn't all lost. So make sure that you've got your little seedlings. I've got some pak choi here. I'm just growing them. I'm going to grow them fairly big to around this height, and then I'm going to transplant them, and they'll be far more likely to survive a slug onslaught. And the final bit of easy prevention you can do does involve wearing a glove, because it's about creating physical barriers, and slugs don't like spiky objects, and we can understand why. So there are two things that I really like to use. The first one is gorse. Gorse is fantastic, grows everywhere around here, and if you just place them around your seedlings like this, especially your lettuce for example, then slugs coming up this way are going to be met with a barrier. It's not 100% slug proof because sometimes slugs can move under the soil, but it's going to make a massive difference. So you can create barriers like that, or you can use something else, which are brambles. Brambles do the exact same job as gorse, and again you want to create a perimeter around like this, and you may want to stack them a couple on top of each other. You can be as tidy or as messy as you want, but just things like that and continuing it around is an excellent way to prevent slugs. So now you know what the simple prevention strategies are. Hopefully you're going to start implementing those as soon as possible. The next thing you want to move on to is attack, because probably at the moment there's a slight imbalance where there's just too many slugs for your garden. So the first thing you've got to do in the attack stage is to identify the slug hotspots, and the hotspots are where slugs would like to go and feast, like the lettuce in front. The onions here, slugs just aren't interested in onions, so I'm not worried about this area. I want to focus my attention onto where the slugs want to be, and this is where I'm going to take action. One of the easiest ways of getting slugs is using the catch and collect technique. And to make this work really well, you've got to make sure that the ground is moist, and try and do this fairly close to a hotspot. So give it a water, and the best time to do this is in late afternoon, early evening. Give it a bit of a water like this. Slugs are drawn towards moisture, otherwise they're going to dry out. Then get a bit of cardboard. You might want it around this size, maybe a bit bigger. Place it down and use 2 stones either side to weigh it down like that. And what you'll find, sometimes it won't happen every night, but you'll find when you come in the morning and release the stones, there'll be a slug or perhaps 10 slugs hiding underneath, and it's just a really simple thing. There's another one, or another method that works just as well, if not better, especially if you have raised beds, and that is using a plank down on the side of the raised bed. And again, if you want to make this more effective, give it a bit of a water first before laying it down. Come back the next day, turn it over, and there should be some slugs. If you're finding that you're still getting some damage from slugs, then it's time to resort to a torch and also a bucket. And you want to choose a night which is fairly warm, but there's moisture and humidity in the air, because this is when you're going to see as many slugs as you'll ever see. So go up to your garden, pick off as many slugs as you can. And if you can do this just 3 days in a row, you're going to make a massive reduction to your slug population and help bring it under control. One of the most effective types of slug trap is a slug pub, where you use beer to entice slugs, and it works so well. But I've heard that apparently this can attract slugs from up to 200 meters away, so I want to look into that a little bit more. But there is a workaround. It doesn't work quite as effectively in terms of scale, but if you find yourself with an old orange or perhaps half a grapefruit, make a little entrance hole and place it next to something like a plant. Place it down like that, and this is a great way to capture slugs. Come back the following morning, turn it upside down, and you'll find all sorts of creatures in there, but slugs are what you're after. After spending a bit of time using the preventative and also the attacking measures to reduce the population of slugs, you may feel that you reach a stage where things are under control, which is brilliant. And this is when you enter the maintenance stage, and the maintenance stage is meant to be as little work as possible but for as much impact as possible. And I have 3 key techniques that I use, but you might need to adjust it to your situation. So for me, in the maintenance stage, the first thing I make sure is that I have a few planks situated around the garden, especially around hot spots against the raised beds to capture slugs, and that is just a great continuous supply. The next thing is to make sure that I always water only in the mornings and not in the evenings, just to reduce the likelihood of slugs trying to go out on adventures. And then the third one is just to make sure that I keep the grass nice and short, especially around the perimeter. And using these 3 things work really well. In this video, I showed you the 3-part strategy that I use to help keep slugs down in the vegetable garden, and I hope that you found it useful. And if you have any further questions to do with slugs and slug issues, then please do let me know down below in the comment section, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Goodbye.